as you've read in the title, this video is going to be a rambling rant on the potentiality of the future of these two titles. Not necessarily Raging Blast, but like Dragon Ball and Naruto. I just happen to put these on the screen, just because they happen to be the nearest ones I had. We recently got, roughly around the same time, announcements that new installments in both franchises were coming as video games. We were going to get an announcement for Dragon Ball Z Tenkaichi, basically Tenkaichi 4, let's be honest here, and the announcement for Naruto, a new Naruto Storm game. It's roughly Storm 5, let's be honest with that. It's just called Naruto X Boruto Storm. It's Storm 5. And I've been reading about all of the discourse and the worries about the character roster, primarily behind the Dragon Ball games. And yet I don't necessarily see too much people talking about the Storm game and people being worried about that. Why is that? I decided to do some scant research into this whole thing here, and I have learned the Storm games tend to not cause too much worry in regards to roster. Storm 1 had the smallest roster, Storm 2 had a bigger roster, Storm 3 had the biggest roster, and then they released Storm 3 Full Burst, and then they released Generations, which admittedly cut down the roster quite a bit, and then they released Revolution. Not necessarily in that exact order. It might be like Storm 1, then Generations, or Storm 2, then Generations, I don't know. But Generations admittedly had a smaller roster compared to Storm 3 and Revolution. And then they made Storm 4 for the PS4 generation, which incorporated new elements, more characters, even more characters. Yes, there were more characters in Storm 4 than in Storm 3. There were more characters in Storm 4 Road to Boruto than in Revolution. So that means the formula here is that they keep adding characters. And admittedly, yes, with each higher numbered installment, there was the risk of having DLC. In Storm 3, we had the Storm 3 Full Burst release, which added some extra characters and a new storyline. But they released a hard copy, they released a digital version called the Full Burst that you could buy and get that version instead of just having to get anything extra on your base game Storm 3 content. As well, they added in Storm 4, they added a series of DLC. Admittedly, they did. But then they released a special edition called Road to Boruto, and in Road to Boruto, they added in those characters into the base game, to my knowledge. So that's excellent things that they're doing here. And then when I looked on the back of this game here and this game here, or more likely, maybe this game here. Let's do some looking at the backs on the back here. We see on the back of this game, there is a Criware and Bandai Namco. Those two are very important. On the back here, we see DIMS. Okay, so DIMS is for the Budokai games. On here, we see Spike. On the back, this is the one I was thinking about. Here, this is a copy of Raging Blast 1. And Raging Blast 2. But on the back of Raging Blast 1 here, we see Bandai Namco and Criware, and as well as Spike. Spike is the one that everybody thinks about when they think about the Tenkaichi games, and I've got all three Tenkaichi games here. On the back of Tenkaichi 1, we see Spike. On the back of Tenkaichi 2, we also see Spike. On the back of Tenkaichi 3, we also see Spike. Spike was the main thing that all three of these guys shared, is Spike. And Spike, as well, is on the Raging Blast games. Which is why Raging Blast might feel very similar to the Tenkaichi games. It's because Spike is here. Spike is still here. That's why. And there's Criware. Criware is on both of the Raging Blast games. Not on the Tenkaichi games, but on the Raging Blast games. There's Criware here. And then there's the Bandai Namco icon, logo. So with the Bandai Namco logo, and the Bandai Namco logo on here, as well as Criware, you can make the informed decision that a lot of the same people are involved with these games. So if a lot of the people are involved with these games, and we look at the Raging Blast games in particular, you find that these types of games with Criware and Bamco in general, with them, they don't have too much in regards to a lot of DLC. And the Raging Blast, admittedly, was an earlier PS3 title, and Raging Blast 2 was a middle of the lifespan PS3 title, and they both didn't have DLC. This game had a very small roster. It only included Dragon Ball Z characters. Same with this one here. This one only included Dragon Ball Z characters. It did not include GT characters like these games did. Tenkaichi here included, I believe, Omega Shenron. I believe it included Baby. I could be wrong there, but it included GT characters like the Super Saiyan 4 transformations. And then into here, we had a bunch more GT characters. You even see one right here. There's Super Saiyan 4 Goku. So there's a lot of GT characters in Tenkaichi 2. And then in here, we had even more GT characters in Tenkaichi 3. And we had a bunch of original Dragon Ball. I call it OG Dragon Ball since, you know, when you say Dragon Ball over here in the English-speaking lands, everybody just thinks of Z. So I have to say OG Dragon Ball to differentiate from Z. So, in OG Dragon Ball, there's a bunch of OG Dragon Ball characters. And that's the best thing about Tenkaichi 3 to me, is that it added so many OG Dragon Ball characters. You had General Blue, you had Tao Pai Pai, King Piccolo, Arale, you had Nam, that guy from the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai. Nam was a playable character in this game. That's insane to think about. That's so awesome. So they had a bunch of OG Dragon Ball characters in this, and they added a couple more of GT characters, like Nova Shenron was added in here. They added, let me think, trying to remember. They added Great Saiyaman 2, number 2, Vidal's Great Saiyaman form. They added her in here. That was excellent. Let me see, trying to remember if there's any. Baby Vegeta. Well, Baby's original form is not in here. Baby Vegeta had 3 transformations. The original form, the base Baby, and then the Super Baby 1, and then the Baby Vegeta that everybody remembers is technically Super Baby 2. So, you get Super Baby 1 and the base Baby Vegeta added into this game. So that was excellent. But the formula is more characters, and in this generation of games there was no DLC, so they had to rely on sequels. They had to try, and they had to justify the sequel. They had to justify why you should buy Tenkaichi 2 over just keeping Tenkaichi 1 and keep playing that. They had to justify it, and admittedly the previous installments would have shorter lifespans, but this is, you could see a timeline of the perfecting of the gameplay. Admittedly, with Tenkaichi 1, there's not too much of a reason to return to this game. But with Tenkaichi 2, they added a bunch of things that only Tenkaichi 2 has, such as its story mode. The story mode added a type of open-world flying segment that Budokai 3 had. In Budokai 3's story mode, you could use any character's Dragon World mode to fly around the map and explore and whatnot. They let you do that in Tenkaichi 2 for the whole story mode, which was excellent. They added a bunch of characters too, such as Yajirobe. Yajirobe is in Tenkaichi 2, and he's also in Returns for Tenkaichi 2. That's awesome. Yajirobe is one of those unsung characters that definitely needs a slot in this new Tenkaichi 4 game. Yajirobe needs to come back. And then, let's see what else we got here. With each installment, though, like with the Tenkaichi 3, they added some more stuff. They refined the combat a little bit more. They added a bunch more characters. They added more stages. They added more things that fans of this franchise just absolutely gush over. And the amount of stuff that they added into Tenkaichi 3 ended up making fans keep coming back, basically. Fans have kept coming back to Tenkaichi 3 over a decade after the game had finished, after it had launched. It's not been 20 years to my knowledge, but it's been a while. It's been a hot minute since this game came out, and people are still playing it. People are still playing this over the newer games. They play this over Ultimate Tenkaichi. They play this over Battle of Z. Admittedly, the Xenoverse games are very popular. I haven't gotten into them. Okay, I'm looking at an image of the back of Xenoverse's case to see who was all involved. We know Bamco's involved with these. So there's Bamco here, there's Toei Animation here, and there's a third icon that I can't read. Then there's one called Dimps Returns. Dimps. If you remember the Budokai games, then you remember Dimps. There's Dimps right here. This is Infinite World. This is technically Budokai 4. Infinite World, Dimps right there. And then there's Havoc. There's Criware. Criware is back. And then there's Vibis, whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of the same people came back for Xenoverse. And it's an arena type of game. So naturally, you would, when you think of Xenoverse, you'd think of the arena type of gameplay that the Tenkaichi series stapled, that was used throughout the Raging Blast games. It was used in Battle of Z. It was used in Tenkaichi Tag Team. It was used all over the place. So Xenoverse was just the evolution of the arena battler. So there are a lot of the people are in there. So that's fine. It doesn't bother me too much. Let's take a look at Xenoverse 2. And we're back. I just checked. It's more or less the same people. So the same people came back. And with Xenoverse 2, they started to do a bunch of DLC. And with Xenoverse 1, they ended up cutting a lot of characters that were in Raging Blast 3. In fact, there are still characters that are exclusive to this title. There are characters that are still exclusive to this title. Though every single character that was in this game is in this game. So we can move this out of the way for now. But there are still characters that are exclusive to this title. There are 6 to my knowledge. Those are androids 14 and 15, Dure and Nezu of Cooler's Armored Squadron, Tarbal of the Hey Goku, Son Goku and his Friends Return, Vegeta's younger brother, and then Hachiak, who is right here. Hachiak is from another OVA type of game. It was kind of like a game type of thing. I don't know if it was on the Super Famicom or this weird video cassette game type thing. It was something in Japan that was only in Japan for a while until we finally got a localized version of it, edited down. They edited out a bunch of things, they reanimated a bunch of things, but we finally got Hachiak brought back and brought into the West officially. And he's exclusive to Raging Blast 2, so if you ever wanted to use Hachiak, you could only do it in Raging Blast 2. So there's 6 exclusive characters in here that we have never seen brought back. They never brought them back into Xenoverse 1, and they didn't bring them back into Xenoverse 2, and of course they're not in Fighters. Fighters, let's talk about Fighters. I am not the biggest fan of Fighters. In fact, I can respect it. I know Fighters has a bunch of dedicated fans. It has a dedicated fan base that has been playing this game for years and years and years. But when I think of Fighters, I think of laziness. I see a very strong game. I see a very, very strong game with an excellent combat system that has turned Dragon Ball into an actual fighting game, because there's a bunch of fighting game snobs out there that thought that the Budokai series was fighting game light. It didn't deserve to be in the same batting park as Tekken and Mortal Kombat and all those other games. It didn't deserve to be in that batting cage. It was a baby's combat fighting system that allowed easy combo chains and all that stuff. And admittedly, they're right. This is a very easy game to play. And at least when I think about it, I think of it's a very accessible game. It is a very accessible game to play that everybody got into, and it was a lot easier to get into for fans who just wanted to play Dragon Ball, but were not pros at fighting games like Tekken and Mortal Kombat. They weren't good at those games. If you weren't good at fighting games, you could be good in a Budokai game, if that makes sense. But with Fighters, this is made by Arc System Works, which, to my knowledge, is behind the BlazBlue series, and BlazBlue has very good arcade combat type of games. The type of thing where you have an arcade cabinet with a bunch of buttons, button mappings, and you press the buttons with the joypad and all that stuff. It feels like a really good arcade fighting game experience. And admittedly, that is exactly what it feels like. But it had a very good story mode. It had a decent story mode, though it has one of the characters I absolutely hate. The most hated character in this entire franchise to me. Android 21. I absolutely hate this character. I know she has a dedicated fan base, but I am finally putting myself out there. I do not like Android 21. I'm sorry. If you like Android 21, that's fine. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. You could be a fan of Android 21 to the cows come home. It doesn't bother me at all. But to me personally, I do not care for this character. I don't care for the character. I don't. You have Android 20, Dr. Gero, who is a very, very old, elderly android man. And then you have Android 21, who looks like she is 21. And they're supposed to be married. What? What's going on there? What? Did she become an android in her 20s, maybe? I'm not the biggest fan of it. I'm not the biggest fan of it. Just not. But the combat system I could definitely respect the heck out of. I see potential to be one of the greatest games in here. But then I start to see the DLC. I start to see the season passes over and over and over, years and years and years of season passes, to the point that the original roster is now less than half of the amount of roster characters you can get through all of the DLC. And this is just a personal opinion, but in my opinion, if your game's roster of characters, if your DLC characters that you can add into the game, if that roster of DLC characters is over half of the characters in the base game, there's something wrong with that picture, in my opinion. There's something wrong with it. Okay, I just decided to take a look at the full roster as of today. And it does look like, thankfully, there is under half of the roster, the base roster, as DLC. There is apparently 24 characters in the base game of Fighters, with 19 DLC characters. 19! So it's not 24 DLC characters, it's 19. It's almost half, but almost half of your roster is DLC. You have a base roster of 24 with maybe, let's see, 1, 2... 3, 4, 5 Dragon Ball Super characters, no Dragon Ball GT characters, and no original Dragon Ball characters, just Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super, and that's fine. And then they add in a bunch more Super characters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8 Super characters. And then we have some GT characters added in. We have 1, 2, there's a fair few of GT characters added in for faithfulness. There's no original Dragon Ball characters. We thought that we were going to get Kid Goku, original Dragon Ball Kid Goku, but no, it's GT Goku. It's fine. But if almost half of the roster is DLC, you can understand why I would be a little bit upset about that. The roster, if you were to leave it at 24 characters, the base roster with no extra characters, no season passes, none of that stuff, I do think that Fighters would still have a dedicated fan base years later, because it is that good of a game. It is. But what I feel feels lazy is that continuing to have season passes, yearly season passes, adding more characters into the roster without refining the gameplay, without adding to the story modes, without adding to any of that. You just add characters. I feel like that harms the game, the image of the game. While Fighters has a dedicated fan base, people love to play the Fighters game. What about Fighters 2? If you're going to keep putting characters into Fighters 1, what's going to be put into Fighters 2 to sell Fighters 2 to the fan base? You would have to put the base roster plus all of the DLC characters into the base roster of Fighters 2 just to justify its existence. Because if you cut characters from that game, even if you add a couple new ones, it would feel like a hit, a dip in the quality of the game because you're missing characters. It makes sense, though, when you're doing like a generational jump. like with Tenkaichi 3 to Raging Blast, there is a substantial drop in characters from Tenkaichi 3 to Raging Blast, because we're moving from the PS2 engine to a brand new engine here. The reason why this was able to have so many games was because it was using the same engine from Tenkaichi 2 that began with Tenkaichi 1. With Tenkaichi 3, they were able to take the existing roster of Tenkaichi 2 and just move them over into here. They refined some things, refined some combat, they refined little things, but it took them a lot less time to just move this game into this game and just add to it. They were just able to add a bunch of things. But since the roster was so big, since there was so much content in here, the story mode did suffer. This had a massive story mode. They had a massive story mode. Such huge battles, all that crap. And they cut a lot of it down. They did. I think with the Saiyan Saga, in this version, in Tenkaichi 3, the Saiyan Saga had maybe 3 battles. You had the fight with Raditz, the fight with Nappa, and then the fight with Vegeta. 3 battles. 3 fights. They justified this using the team battle system that was introduced, I believe, with Tenkaichi 2. I don't think Tenkaichi 3 had it, but if they did, then I could be wrong that Tenkaichi 1 had it. And if Tenkaichi 1 started with the team battle system, then that's fine. But I remember using it more in Tenkaichi 2. But they used the team battle system that was prevalent in the Tenkaichi series to cut down on the amount of separate story battles they had to do in Tenkaichi 3. And they added in-battle dialogue. So as you're fighting, characters would be talking to each other and bantering. And then you could press the R3 button to have another cutscene, and as the story would shift, another character would arrive, and you would use that. So for example, with the fight with Raditz, your team contains basically Goku, Piccolo, and I think Kid Gohan. I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I played this. But I think it would be just those 2. But you start out with Goku versus Raditz, and then you press R3 partway through the battle, and Goku switches out for Piccolo. And then it's Piccolo versus Raditz. Whereas in Tenkaichi 2, you would have just one story mission with Goku versus Raditz, and then the second battle would be Piccolo versus Raditz. So they cut that out, and they condensed all of the amount of content into just a series of longer battles, but they were able to contain a bunch of separate battles into a single battle. So that was how they were able to condense a lot of space, in my opinion, in order to contain all of the characters. This was all on a single DVD disc. A single DVD disc. Everything in this game was on a single DVD disc. Now imagine the amount of content a Blu-ray game disc could hold. But since they were moving into new technology, they had to cut down on the roster substantially to bring in a new engine. They didn't want to jump out the bat with the entire Tenkaichi 3 roster right out the bat, because it would take them a long time. They start the roster with they start the new franchise with the smallest roster. It's the same thing that happened with the Ninja Storm games. With the regular Ultimate Ninja games that began with the PS2 era, you would have Ultimate Ninja 1, 2, 3, and I think 4 on the PS2, with the roster expanding with each new title. Then, when Ultimate Ninja Storm 1 comes out on the PS3, the roster is suddenly a lot smaller. It's because they went to a new engine, a new generation of games. They had to cut a lot of crap out. And then with Ninja Storm 2, they added all characters back. Ninja Storm 3, they added them all back. And Ninja Storm 4, they added more in. And then with Ninja Storm 5, they were using the same engine, just on a new generation console. And they added even more. But with this, they start the series with this. It's a departure from the Budokai type of combat. So they cut down on the characters. There's a lot of characters that were in. I believe this came out after this one, so let's do this one here. All right. So there's a bunch of characters that are in Budokai 3 that are not in Tenkaichi 1. So they cut down a lot of the content and just experiment, get the combat system going, get the combat flowing, get that all good, and then they can reuse a bunch of assets from Tenkaichi 1. They reuse a bunch of assets into making Tenkaichi 2. So they expand the roster again. They give you more content, more story, a lot of stuff, because they're reusing a lot of the assets from this game to save time. So this is where a bulk of the time went, and then about a year later they make this one, and they're reusing assets. And then they continue to reuse assets in this to make this. So this is basically the definitive product of a couple years of developing for this franchise, for this engine. This is why this one has the most content. And then when we reach Raging Blast 1, all the content's suddenly gone. But then, it's coming back with Raging Blast. For going from Raging Blast 1 into Raging Blast 2, the roster suddenly explodes and expands again. So they bring Future Gohan back, they bring the movie characters back, they bring a bunch of they bring the what-if transformations that helped sell Raging Blast, like Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta and Super Saiyan 3 Broly. They bring those back into here. They bring in 6 exclusive characters that they've never brought back into any future game into here to help sell this game. Hachiak was one of the big selling points of this game, because nobody had seen it before outside of that OVA Japan exclusive, so that was a good selling point. It even shows it on the back here, I think, right here. Yeah, they're selling. This was a selling point on the back of the cover, the case, that they're bringing these in. They brought Deborah back. They brought a lot of new characters into the game, and they brought all of the returning characters that were in this franchise back into this game. And it is my full belief that if they did make a Raging Blast 3, they would have added back in a bunch of the characters that were in here, namely like the GT characters and the OG Dragon Ball characters. They might have added a bunch of those back into Raging Blast, into the hypothetical Raging Blast 3. They would have added those guys back in there, because now with Raging Blast 2, they had more time to play with this new engine that they created, because they were using a lot of assets in this engine to make this game. So making this game took a lot less time. So when they make Raging Blast 3, they would reuse all of the assets from 2 to make 3. Just to add, and use the extra time they were able to save by doing that to add more characters, if that makes sense. So what I do feel is going to happen with Tenkaichi 4 is that it's been a hot minute since this game. It's been a hot minute. They will not be able to reuse assets from Tenkaichi 3. They will not be able to use the base roster from Tenkaichi 3 to give you the base roster of Tenkaichi 4 with just a lot more characters. I know for a fact that that's not going to happen. But what could happen, this engine is not that old. It's not that old. And if the same people who made this game are coming back to make Tenkaichi 4, they could use Raging Blast 2 as a framework and reuse a bunch of these assets to bring these characters back in. But what's more likely to happen, what I feel is more likely to happen, though, is that they're going to reuse the assets from Xenoverse 2. They're probably going to use the assets from Xenoverse 2. That's my theory, at any rate. I want them to reuse the assets from this one, because this one feels more like a Tenkaichi game than Xenoverse did. Xenoverse cut out a bunch of stuff. It cut out, like, the opening battle banter. It cut out the end battle banter. It cut out a bunch of stuff. These two feel like a Tenkaichi game. Though, there's a bunch of people who prefer the Tenkaichi games to the Raging Blast games. I completely sympathize and understand that. Me personally, I like this one better because my PlayStation 3 can't play PS2, so I can just pop this into my PlayStation 3 that's already hooked up, so I don't have to dig the PS2 out to play this one, you know. But I understand, and I would actually prefer this roster to this roster, though I would prefer that you add, you take the 6 exclusive characters from this and just add it to this roster, and there you go. If you did that, then you wouldn't have to worry about it, because this game has 8 characters that are not in this game. There are 8 characters in this game that are not in this game. And it's like, that's just what's going to happen. There is a character in this game that has not been added to any future title since. And it's been a while since Tenkaichi 3, right? It's been a hot minute. For instance, Budokai 3. It's been a hot minute. It's been a hot minute since they made the unofficial Budokai 4, which is called Infinite World. It's been a minute since they made that one. And then they made these. So, In this game, which I believe released in, what, 2004, 2005? 2004. They had Kid Oob, the End of Z segment in the final arc of Dragon Ball Z. Goku faces off against Kid Oob in the World Martial Arts Tournament. That Kid Oob character is playable in this one. And while they bring Oob back by Tenkaichi 2, they bring his GT version in. So the GT Oob is playable in both Tenkaichi 2 and Tenkaichi 3. But the Kid Oob, which is playable in Budokai 3, did not return for Infinite World. And naturally, he wasn't in Tenkaichi 1. He was not in Tenkaichi 2. And he was definitely not in Tenkaichi 3, which would probably be the most likely place they would have brought him back into. But they didn't. They brought the Pilaf machine into Tenkaichi 3, but they didn't bring Kid Oob back. And then, of course, with the Raging Blast games, naturally, I would understand not having Kid Oob in Raging Blast 1. But if you're going to add very obscure characters like Tarble into Raging Blast 2, I would have thought you would have added Kid Oob to the Raging Blast 2's roster. They didn't do that. And then with Tenkaichi, with Xenoverse 1 and 2, they did not add Oob into that one either, despite it making all the sense to do so. Which means I also don't think that they're going to have him in the 4th Tenkaichi. I don't think he's going to be in that one either. But I can dream, I can wish, I can hope, I can have a dream roster of like 200 characters. I can make a dream roster, big, huge roster, all everybody's, and say, oh, Tenkaichi 4 should have everybody. It's just not logical. Even if you throw out the DLC argument, even if Tenkaichi 4 had 0 DLC, it still would probably not have a base roster of what you would find in Tenkaichi 3. I guarantee you. Even if Tenkaichi 4 has zero DLC, 0, it would still have less characters than Tenkaichi 3. Why? It's plain and simple, because when you're crossing from a generational gap from like this era into this era, you have to make a new engine. You're making a new engine, you're making new graphics, you're making new combat, you're making new specials, you're animating the specials, you're doing a lot more work. So doing that for all these characters on top of your core roster that you would make for the next installment on the next generation of systems is just going to take way too much time, and it's going to be too much of a gamble, because you can't even guarantee that the game is going to sell like hotcakes to pay for all that time that you're developing it for. So you have to cut the characters down. You have to. And it's just how they do it with all this crap. For example, let's talk about the Dynasty Warriors series. Dynasty Warriors 4 and 5 have more characters than Dynasty Warriors 6 did. Dynasty Warriors 6 was the first PlayStation 3 era Dynasty Warriors game, and Dynasty Warriors 4 and 5 were PlayStation 2 era games. They had an engine, they started the engine, they created the engine, they refined the engine, they added more characters with each subsequent installment. Each subsequent year added more stuff to that engine that they started with. But then when they make the new engine, they have to do everything over again, so it makes sense to cut the characters down. So Dynasty Warriors 6 had less characters. The Dynasty Warriors 7 added everybody back. The Dynasty Warriors 8 added everybody, even more characters. All the characters are back now. And that's just that's just what they do, okay? They cut characters out for this. They bring them back with the sequel. And then they add all the new stuff for the third one. That's just what they did. What I think is going to happen, though, is because we have entered this new age where instead of a bunch of sequels, we get DLC. So what I think is going to happen is your base roster is probably going to look like what Raging Blast 1's roster is. It's probably going to look like this roster, though they may admittedly cut out some characters like Dodoria, Zarbon, maybe a Bird or Jace, and Goldo may be kicked out of there, maybe Base Gohan, Teen Gohan, Cell Games Gohan, he may be cut out of there. They may cut Broly out, and they may add some Dragon Ball Super characters, but I can tell you that the roster is probably not going to be this amount. It'll be closer to this amount than to this amount, because it's the next generation. They are making this from the ground up. They are not reusing assets. Because the reason why this has so many characters is because they were reusing assets. They were reusing the assets, and I can tell you for a fact. I mean, I played a bunch of these characters, and their movesets felt the exact same as this game's version. All these characters have a moveset. It's like they have the exact same moveset in here. They may add a special here or there. They may update the basic combo chain for a transformation or two. But the core concept of that character that started with this game is just simply ported over into the sequel. That's what they did to save time. But because it's the first installment, like I've been saying plenty of times, it's not going to have this massive roster. I can wish that it would all I want. I could comment on as many videos on this site as I want saying that I wish it would have this base roster. But it's probably not going to. And the reason why Ninja Storm 5 Naruto X Boruto that they've announced, Ninja Storm 5. The reason why that one is probably going to have more characters than Ninja Storm 4 Road to Boruto is because they're probably going to use that exact same engine. They're probably going to revive that exact same engine because it saves money. They're going to reuse that engine, reuse the core concept of characters, reuse all of the assets, and use the extra time they have now gained because they're reusing a bunch of assets to make new characters, to make a new storyline, to animate the storyline, the dubbing, the new lines, and all that stuff. So that's what they do. It's what you do to save time and money, to reuse assets. Yeah, there you go. That's why I think Storm 5 is going to have a bunch of characters. I think Storm 5 is going to have more characters than Road to Boruto Storm 4. I do. I honestly do think so. But I don't think that the new Tenkaichi 4 is going to have more characters than Tenkaichi 3. I think the roster is going to be closer to Raging Blasts. I don't think there's going to be GT characters. I don't think there's going to be OG Dragon Ball characters. I think it's just going to be roughly half C and half Super. That's what I think. It's going to have a core roster of half C, half Super. So you're going to have, like, your base Goku. You might have two Gokus. You're going to have a Goku Z and Goku Super. Because you have to split all his transformations across. You're only going to share the base of the Super Saiyan across Z Goku and Super Goku. Super Goku is going to get his Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Blue, Ultra Instinct on top of Super Saiyan. So he's got those 4 transformations. Your C Goku is going to have your Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 3, and your Super Gogeta, Super Vegito. There you're going to get those. And then you're going to have Vegeta Blue and Gogeta Blue for your Super Goku. Alright, then that's just what they're going to do. That's just what makes sense to do. What else? Where am I going? Where else am I going to go? Vegeta is probably also going to have a Z Vegeta and a Super Vegeta. Though, if you ask me, I would honestly prefer what they started with Raging Blast 2. In Raging Blast 2, they implemented custom super attacks. They added a bunch of super attacks to a bunch of characters, but they only let you use 4 at once. Which means, as you progress through a character's Galaxy mode, which is replace the campaign mode, you would unlock more super attacks, which you could customize into your allotted 4. So, for example, with Goku, his base form would unlock things like the Meteor combination that he used against Piccolo in the 23rd Martial Arts Tournament. They would add the Kaioken attack that he used against Nappa. It would add the Kaioken times 3 attack that he used against Vegeta. It would add the Kaioken times 10 Kamehameha that he used against Frieza. They added a bunch of special attacks that he used throughout the franchise, but instead of giving you multiple Gokus, like in this one, Goku Mid, Goku Early, Goku End, and all that stuff, they gave you one Goku that you could customize to make it look how his moveset would look at however point in the story you want to use him at. And that, I think, makes more sense to do. I think it makes more sense to have this type of gameplay mechanic so that you don't have to have 2 Gokus and you just have to have 1 Goku. Just give that 1 Goku massive moveset and customizable super attacks that you could customize onto his character and a bunch of outfits his Z outfit, his super outfit, a bunch of outfits. Outfits can help determine what part in the story your character is going to be. So having a bunch of outfits for every character can help cover not having to have a bunch of Krillins, for example. By giving Krillin a outfit that lets him put his hair on, then you don't have to have a separate Krillin icon. You just have to reskin it. It's a skin. The skin onto the same character model takes a lot less time than making a completely new character dynamic with moveset and stuff. You know, it just takes less time just to make a skin. So that's what I think you should do, add a bunch of outfits to the characters, so that you can cut down on the amount of Gokus, the amount of Vegetas. I do think you should put Majin Vegeta into the Vegeta character. What they did here to help cut down on the amount of transformations is that you would hold down a certain button to open up your transformation list. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. And normally you would have his Super Saiyan 1, Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 3. And then you'd have this button here that would bring up a fusion list of Super Gogeta, Vegeta Base, Vegeta, Super Vegeta. So you could press that button to go into the fusion space, and it just makes more sense. So with Vegeta, you can have a transformation list drop down in battle, where he would have Super Saiyan, Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Blue. It's just a bunch of them, you know. And when you're going to character selection screen, you could have a drop down for his transformations. They would have a drop down showing Super Saiyan, Super Saiyan 2, Super Vegeta, Majin Vegeta, Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Blue, and if you want to include his Ultra Ego, I don't think they're going to have manga exclusive characters in Tenkaichi 4. I don't think so. I really don't. But if they do happen to add them, if they do happen to add Ultra Ego, then that would be where you would find it. I'm already at 41 minutes, but I'm still going to continue this rant. I'm still going to try to continue this rant and see where we're going to go with this roster. I believe it would be logical to see a roster of at least 75 characters. That does not include transformations. Just 75 icons on this screen to select. It would select the icon like the Vegeta icon, and it would have his Super Saiyans and all that stuff. So if you want to count transformations, then it would be a lot more than 75. But I think you would have 75 icons on the character selection board. I think that would be a good base roster. The movie characters you're probably not going to see, though I think it would be pretty understanding to see that Bardock might make it into the base roster. After all, Bardock made it into Raging Blast 1. You might see people very popular movie characters like Bardock, or you might see Broly. You know, Bardock and Broly were in this one. But I don't think you're going to see Cooler. I don't think you're going to see Bojack. You're probably not going to see Android 13. You're probably not going to see Super Vegeta. You're probably not. I don't think you're going to see Fighter Trunks. I don't think you might, but I don't think you're going to. But hopefully we see him. We're definitely going to get Super Saiyan 2 Cell Games Gohan. I think we're definitely going to get him. You can expect to see Vegeta, Piccolo, you can expect to see him, you can expect to see Krillin, though I don't know if they're going to add his hair form. That's up in the air. They haven't added that in the Raging Blast games either. So that makes no sense why they wouldn't add that. But you're probably going to definitely see the Brats. You're definitely going to see 18. You're definitely going to see Android 17, though I don't know if you're going to see Shiro in 19. You might just see one of the two. I don't know if you're going to see both. The way that they did it with the Budokai game here, I have 1 and 2. I just didn't bring them out for this video demonstration, so we're just going to point at this one here. Just imagine I'm pointing at Budokai 1. In Budokai 1, it did not include both Android 20 and Android 19. It only included Android 19. In fact, in the Budokai engine, Budokai 1 has 3 exclusive characters. Budokai 1 had Dodoria Zarbon and Android 19. 3 characters that have never been in a sequel Budokai game. That's insane to think about. But in Budokai 2, 3, and Infinite World, you had Android 20. You did not have Android 19. You had Ginyu and Raccoon. You did not have Birder, Jace, and Guldo. You had Tien, but you did not have Chaozu. You did not have Master Roshi. You definitely didn't have Yajirobe. You didn't have a bunch of characters that the arena games brought in. The arena games made it a lot easier to bring a bunch of characters in. They brought in Chaozu. Chaozu was in the base game here, even. Chaozu was in the first Tenkaichi game, even. Right here. In fact, I think the first Tenkaichi was the first playable appearance for our boy Chaozu. So, 3 cheers for Chaozu! I don't know if he's going to be in Tenkaichi 4, to be honest with you. I really don't. And if we have a 75-character roster split across all of Dragon Ball Z and all of Super, then that slot that Chaozu could take up could probably go towards giving another character that really deserves it more slots, so you probably might not see him. You're probably going to see Master Roshi, but it might be his Dragon Ball Super appearance. You're probably definitely going to see Tien and Yamcha, their character staples. They were even in Fighters, okay? So you're probably going to see them. You're probably going to see Hit. You're probably going to see Jiren. You're probably going to see Beerus. I don't know if you'll see Whis, but you're definitely going to see Beerus. You're probably going to see Goku Black. I don't know if you'll see Zamasu, but you're definitely going to see Goku Black. I don't know if you'll see all of the Boos. You'll probably see Fat Boo. You might see Fat Boo. You might see Kid Boo. You might see Super Boo. I don't know. You'll definitely see Cell. You'll definitely see Cell. You'll definitely see Frieza. You'll probably see Raditz and Nappa. You'll probably see those guys. I don't know if you'll see a Vegeta Scouter, though. Like, even in this game, they had Vegeta's Scouter and then base Vegeta. I think Vegeta's Scouter's moveset should be incorporated into the base Vegeta's to save a slot. So, I don't think you're going to see that. Trunks, his sword combat mode is very integral to the Trunks character, so that's why they always had Trunks and then Trunks fighting, because after he drops the sword is when he puts on the Saiyan armor, and it was that Trunks that existed in the Cell games. It was that Trunks that fought in the BoJack movie and against the Broly character. It was that Trunks that was in those movies. So that's why it made sense to have 2 separate future Trunks characters, and I do think that you should incorporate Dragon Ball Super's Future Trunks into the Future Trunks sword character as an outfit. That character's moveset should be into that core character and leave the Trunks fighting alone. So they'll probably have 2 slots for Trunks. 3 if you count Kid Trunks. Gotenks would probably make it in there. I definitely think you'll see Super Saiyan 3. I don't know about Super Saiyan 1. I don't think you're going to see base Gotenks. You probably might, but I don't think he's going to be there. Vegito, you're probably definitely going to see Super Vegito and Super Saiyan Blue Vegito. I don't know if you're going to see base Vegito. You're probably going to see Gogeta. You're going to see Gogeta Blue. I don't know if you'll see Super Gogeta, because Super Gogeta is a Janemba movie exclusive, you know? So you might not see him. But I do think they're probably going to put the Broly movie in there. Super Broly. Dragon Ball Super Broly. You're probably going to get Super Broly. Probably not going to get Movie 8 Broly. But you're going to get Super Broly. I do think you're going to get Bardock from the Super Broly movie, maybe. And you're probably, maybe, hey, we might even get some exclusive characters that have never been played before. In Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, in one of the DLCs, the Bardock DLC, you could play for the first time ever as Kid Vegeta. That was the first time you'd ever been able to play as him. I think it would be really cool to add him into the base roster. So, but, you know, we're really condensing it here for the base thing. But since Kakarot is such a recent game, they might be able to reuse some of those assets to pull it in, but I don't think the same people who worked on Kakarot are going to be working on Tenkaichi 4, so don't put your hopes up. But it would be I think it would be really cool to add him in there. And you're probably not going to see the movie characters, like I said. You're not going to see GZ, you're not going to see OG Dragon Ball, no Kid Goku. You're probably going to get 3 Gohans. Probably 3 Gohans. It just makes sense to have 3 Gohans. We've always had 3 Gohans. We had 3 Gohans in this game, okay? We had 3 Gohans in this game. You had your Kid Gohan, which is a very important character throughout the Namek Saga. He had a very well-rounded moveset. The Teen Gohan, that they call him, I call it Cell Games Gohan, he is only important for Super Saiyan 2. So you might only see Super Saiyan 2 Cell Games Gohan. You might not even see Super Saiyan or Base Gohan. You're just going to see Super Saiyan 2. But the Super Saiyan 2 character has a good, solid moveset, and I do think that you'll get him. And as for Gohan, I personally want to see all of his forms, base form, Super Saiyan 2, Ultimate, and even Beast. I don't think Beast is going to be in there. I really don't. But I do think it would be really cool to add him. If you added the Dragon Ball Super superhero characters into the base roster of Tenkaichi 4, it would be a selling point. It would be a really strong selling point to say, hey, this is the first game that has these characters, so if you want to play as them, buy our game. And it would be a really strong selling point. So I think it would be really cheap, it would be really lazy, and wouldn't be very profitable to just add Gohan Beast or Piccolo Orange to fighters or something. Because then people would have them in what would arguably be a superior fighting game to Tenkaichi 4. So I think you should have them only in Tenkaichi 4. Add them in as like a selling feature, a selling point to the game, saying, hey, we have characters that are going to have their first appearance ever in this game. And then people would be like more likely to buy it. That's what helped sell Raging Blast 2, was that they had characters that have never been seen before, like Hachi. Well, naturally Hachi's been seen before, but like in a game, like playable Western game, we'd never seen him or Tarble in a game before, so that was a good selling point. It's all about marketing. How are you going to sell the game? Well, they helped sell it by putting Hachiak on the front cover along with the movie characters that were in here. That's why they put them on the cover, to help sell the game. You go like, oh, we can play as all these guys. That's awesome. Let's get the game. I think that they're probably going to have Hit. You're definitely going to have Hit. You probably have Kefla, Caulifla. I don't know if you'll get Kale. I don't know if you'll get Kaba. I don't know if you'll get Frost. You probably definitely not get Champa. And let's try the Super Tournament place, whatever. You're probably going to get Jiren. I don't know about anybody else. But Jiren is almost probably definitely going to be a definite maybe. Topo is a maybe. I think he might make it in there. Dispo is unlikely. Ribrian, Catapesla, definitely unlikely. But they're probably more likely as DLC. They're probably more likely as DLC. Since the DLC is going to be reusing assets to make the models, to sell them to you. You know, I understand the DLC. I do. I don't like it personally, but I understand it. Because they're using the profits that from this base game to make these extra characters, to add them into the game. Because they may not have the budget to add everybody that you want to be in the game, but with the profits from the base game, they can add them into the game for you. That's what I think they're going to do. They're going to have a base roster that looks more like this, and then after 4 or 5 years, it's probably going to look like this. So that's probably what you're going to get. Launch after 4 or 5 years. Launch after 4 or 5 years. At least that's what I think is more likely to happen. I've been rambling and I'm running out of content, and I'm probably repeating myself at this point. I was going to talk about my dream roster. The dream roster of who I want to be in the Dragon Ball Raging Blast. Not Raging Blast, Dragon Ball Tenkaichi 4. What I would want to see in a Tenkaichi 4. I would want to see all of the primary characters from Dragon Ball Z. It would be Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, all 3 Gohans, kid, teen, adult. You could combine his Dragon Ball Super's Gohan into the adult Gohan character. Definitely keep Great Saiyaman. Great Saiyaman needs an awesome moveset that is completely alien to the regular Gohan character. Definitely add Great Saiyaman. I really want to see Great Saiyaman. This is one of my favorite characters. I don't even care. I want to see Mr. Satan in there. I want to see Fidel. I want to see Tien, Yamcha, Krillin. You might add Chatsu, maybe, but definitely Tien, Yamcha, and Krillin. I want to see Raditz, Nappa. I want to see... Yeah, at the very least, I want to see Zarbon. At the very least, Zarbon had a pretty big vendetta against Vegeta during the Namek Saga. I think it would be really cool to add that character in there. And it may be Dodoria, but definitely Zarbon. If you can't have Dodoria, can't have both, then Zarbon. And I do think, at the very least, the only Ginyus that you really need are Raccoon Ginyu. But it would be awesome to have all 5. But if you can only have 2, then Raccoon Ginyu, just like they did with the first Budokai. I think Frieza needs to have all of his forms. First form, second form, third form, final form, and golden should be there. Let's see, going forward from there, the main characters from the Android Saga, you should definitely have at least Android 19. You don't really need Android 20 Dr. Gero, but you do need 19. Add 19 in, and if you want to add Gero, that's awesome, but you need 19. You need 17, 18, and Android 16, you need all 3 of those guys. And then you need Cell. I do think you need imperfect, semi-perfect, and perfect Cell, at the very least. I don't know about super perfect Cell, but it would be awesome if you could include that. And then we definitely need Future Trunks, the sword version, and the non-sword version. Definitely need that. Moving into the Buu Saga, we need Goten, Kid Trunks, and we need the Gotenks character. We definitely need the Vegito character. We need to see Deborah, Fat Buu, Super Buu, and Kid Buu. Definitely need those 4 characters. What else? That's basically all the core roster you need for C. Anything else is just bonus at this point. Anything else after that is bonus. Moving into Super, I think you need to have Beerus, at the very least, from the Battle of Gods arc. You need to, like I said, Golden Frieza is really the only thing from Resurrection F you really need, so that you already got that with the core character. And then moving into the Universe 6 arc, Kit is the only thing I definitely think needs to be in there. Anybody else is just bonus, so move on from there. You need to have Goku Black, you definitely need him. And you need the Dragon Ball Super Trunks moveset somehow to be added in there. Anything else after that is just bonus. Merged Zamasu should be a transformation for Black if you can't have base Zamasu. Moving on from there into the Tournament of Power, you definitely need Jiren. And everybody else is just bonus at that point. And I think that is a core roster of 50 to 75 characters. You can add a bunch of bonus things after that to fill up the roster as you see fit. But that is probably the bare minimum of what you could expect for Tenkaichi 4. The bare minimum. Anything else is just bonus. And I think the bonus should be sellable things. Things that can be things that the game can sell you. Like having Dragon Ball Super's Broly. Like having Gohan Beast, Orange Piccolo, Gamma 1, Gamma 2, Cell Max, having those 5 characters added in there, that would help sell it. But, and the movie characters, at the very least you need Bardock. At the very least you need Bardock. Broly already is covered by his super version, so you don't really need his movie 8 version, but Bardock is a really core characters you need. Outside of that, I don't think anything else is really needed. Everything else after that is just desirable characters. But I do want to say one thing before I close this video out. If you're going to add Future Gohan to Tenkaichi 4, you added him to Xenoverse 2. So Future Gohan is a pretty solid character that has been consistently added into future titles. He was in Tenkaichi 3. He was in Raging Blast 2. He was in Xenoverse 2, so I could expect to see Future Gohan either in Tenkaichi 4 or Tenkaichi 5 in a future sequel, or in DLC in Tenkaichi 4. If you add Future Gohan, I want you to think about this really hard. Do you want Dragon Ball Z Sagas to be the only game in this entire franchise spanning 30-some-odd years to be the only game to feature a playable, one-armed Future Gohan appearance? Do you want Sagas to go down in history as the game that has one-armed Future Gohan? Or do you want to finally add one-armed Future Gohan to your roster? I think it's time. I think it's finally time to add a playable, one-armed Future Gohan. Do it. Do it!